They say the devil is in the details. But that is a lie people tell themselves because they are too lazy to read the fine print. The devil is not in the details. The devil is in the definitions section, usually around page 4, paragraph 3, subsection B. That is the place where I lived for 16 years. While the sales guys were out buying steak dinners on the company card and the marketing team was busy talking about synergy and brainstorming sessions, I was in the back room building the engine. My name is Howard Miller. I am a corporate licensing architect. It sounds boring. I know. It sounds like the kind of job where you wear beige cardigans and die quietly at your desk. But in the world of data streaming, I am the person who makes sure the billion-dollar pipes do not burst. I drafted the code, not the computer code, but the legal code, the DNA of the company. 16 years ago, this company, Streamline, was not a tech giant in a glass tower in Wilmington. It was 3 guys and me crammed into a rented office above a tire shop that smelled permanently of burnt rubber and desperation. I remember sitting on a folding chair, balancing a laptop on my knees, drafting the original exclusivity agreements while the founder, Charles Albright, paced around smoking cheap cigars. He was a difficult man to deal with, but he was smart. He knew that the technology did not matter if the rights were not locked down. Howard, he would say, pointing a rough finger at me, make it bulletproof. I want a contract so tight that if they try to breathe without paying us, they owe us for the oxygen. So I did. I built a fortress of paper. I wove clauses together like a web made of razor wire. I created the licensing infrastructure that eventually turned that tire shop startup into a $1.2 billion empire. For 16 years, I stayed in the background. I did not want the fame. I did not need the magazine covers. I just wanted the machine to work. The problem with building a perfect machine is that eventually people forget it needs a mechanic. They just assume it runs on magic. Charles Albright died last year of a heart attack. And just like that, the kingdom passed to his son. Enter Brad Albright. Brad was 32 years old, had an MBA from a school his father paid a library wing for, and had teeth whitened to a shade that does not exist in nature. He walked into the CEO office on day 1 wearing a suit that cost more than my first car, carrying a latte and a sense of entitlement so dense it had its own gravitational pull. I knew we were in trouble the moment he called his first all-hands meeting. He did not talk about stability, and he did not talk about our core licensing revenue. He talked about disruption. He used the word pivot 6 times in 3 minutes. He looked at the company his father built, the company I secured, and saw it as an ATM for his ego. He looked at me, the man in the corner with the sensible glasses and the 3-ring binders, and he did not see the architect. He saw furniture. He saw a legacy cost. He saw a relic. I am 55, not that it mattered to him. I remember a meeting about 3 months into his reign. I was trying to explain the volatility of our Asia-Pacific sublicensing agreements. It is a delicate ecosystem. If you pull one thread, the whole contract unravels. Howard, Brad interrupted, spinning a fidget spinner on the mahogany table. You are getting bogged down in the how. I need you to focus on the wow. We need to be agile. You need to break things. I lowered my reading glasses. Brad, if we break the sublicensing terms in Singapore, we trigger a default clause in the German master agreement. We lose the European market overnight. He rolled his eyes. That is just legal mumbo-jumbo, Howard. We have lawyers for that. I need visionaries, not librarians. The room went quiet. The other executives, men I had worked with for a decade, men whose careers I had saved from a dozen lawsuits, stared at their notebooks. No one said a word. No one defended the man who built the floor they were standing on. That was the moment. I did not say anything. I just closed my binder. The sound of the metal ring snapping shut echoed in that silent room. Understood, I said. My voice was calm. It is always calm. My rage does not scream. It calculates. I will stop being a librarian, Brad smirked, thinking he had won a power struggle. He thought he was training the old staff. He had no idea. He had just walked into the reactor core and turned off the cooling system. See, Brad made the classic mistake of the inherited rich. He confused authority with power. He had the title, the corner office, and the signatory pen, but he did not know where the bodies were buried. He did not even know there was a graveyard. I went back to my office, a small windowless box compared to the glass fishbowls the new VP hires got, and I started to organize. I did not organize for efficiency. I organized for war. I pulled up the original founding documents, the ones with the coffee stains, the ones typed on software that does not exist anymore. I sat there surrounded by the hum of the servers. I authorized the budget for 10 years ago, and I waited. I knew it was coming. People like Brad are predictable. They are like bad code. They always crash the same way. He needed to cut costs to fund his visionary new projects, and the easiest cost to cut is the quiet department that never makes a fuss. He was going to fire me. I could feel it. But here's the thing about architects. We keep the blueprints, and sometimes we build trapdoors that only we can see. I looked at the framed photo of Charles Albright on my desk. "Sorry, old man," I whispered. "Your kid is about to learn why you never fire the person who holds the keys to the castle." I saved 3 specific files to an encrypted USB drive, put the drive in my pocket, and waited for the phone to ring. It did not take long. The call came on a Tuesday morning. Tuesday is the day for firing people if you want to avoid a weekend disaster. The HR director, a woman named Brenda Croft, who looked like she was fresh out of college and exclusively shopped at trendy corporate boutiques, called my extension. "Howard, could you pop down to the strategy room?" Just a quick sync. Her voice had that tremble in it, the look of someone about to deliver bad news using therapy speak. "On my way," I said. I picked up my coffee mug, took a sip of the lukewarm liquid, and left it there. I grabbed nothing else. No notebook, no pen, just me in my gray suit. I walked down the hallway I had walked down thousands of times. I passed the server room, the wall of patents where my name was on several as a contributor, and the break room where marketing interns were talking about hustle culture. They looked at me like I was already gone. I walked into the strategy room. It was a glass box in the center of the floor, designed for transparency, but the blinds were drawn. Brenda was sitting at the table, clutching a manila folder. Brad was leaning against the window, looking out at the parking lot. He did not even turn around when I walked in. He was checking his watch, a gold Rolex Daytona. "Have a seat, Howard," Brenda said. She did not offer me water. That is the first sign. If they offer water, they feel guilty. If they do not, they just want you gone. I sat down and folded my hands. "Am I being terminated, Brenda?" Brenda blinked. She was not ready for the direct approach. She wanted to do the corporate dance. "We are going through a strategic realignment, Howard. Brad and the board have been reviewing our operational efficiency." "Restructuring," I said. "Just say the word. It has fewer syllables." Brad turned around, wearing that familiar smirk. "Look, Howard, let's not make this a drama. The industry is shifting. We need modern thinkers. You have done adequate work here for the era, but we are pivoting to a lean, agile model. We need speed, and frankly, your department is a bottleneck." "A bottleneck?" I repeated. "You mean compliance?" "I mean dead weight," Brad said, dropping the corporate speak. "You review contracts like we are buying real estate in 1990. It is slow and expensive. We are automating the licensing framework. AI can do what you do in seconds." I had to bite the inside of my cheek to stop myself from laughing. AI doing my job. Good luck getting a software algorithm to understand the nuance of a cross-border indemnity clause regarding third-party intellectual property in a non-extradition treaty zone. "So I am redundant," I said. "Your role has been eliminated," Brenda corrected, sliding a thick packet across the table, effective immediately. "We have prepared a severance package. 2 weeks of pay for every year of service, capped at 6 months. We are also offering outplacement services to help you update your resume." I looked at the packet. 6 months of pay for 16 years of building the company. It was an insult, a complete joke, but I did not reach for it yet. "And my equity?" I asked. "My vesting schedule?" Brad waved a hand. "Standard terms apply. Anything unvested is forfeited. You wrote half the policy, did you not?" "I did," I said. "I wrote the policy for employees. I did not write the policy for founders and partners." Brad frowned. "What? Nothing," I said, standing up. "I will sign the separation agreement, but I need one thing first." "We cannot give you access to your computer," Brenda said, panicking slightly. "Security protocol." "I do not need the computer. I need a hard copy of my original employment contract, the one signed by your father in 2008. And a printout of my current personnel record showing my termination date and cause." "Why?" Brad asked, his eyes narrowing. "For my unemployment filing," I lied smoothly. "The state requires proof of the original hire date and the exact cause of termination for long-term benefits calculations." It was complete bureaucratic gibberish, but people like Brad and Brenda are terrified of bureaucracy. They do not understand it, so they obey it. Fine. Brad sighed. Brenda, print it out. Let's get this over with. I have a lunch meeting. Brenda hurried out of the room. Brad and I were left alone in the quiet glass box. You think I am making a mistake? Brad asked, trying to prompt a fight. He wanted me to yell so he could feel justified. I think you are doing exactly what I expected you to do, I said. You are pruning the tree because you think the leaves are messy without realizing the roots are the only thing holding it up. We will be fine, he scoffed. The revenue is on autopilot. Is it? I asked softly. Brenda returned, handing me a thin stack of papers. My original 2008 contract and the termination notice signed by Brad dated today. Thank you, I said, placing the papers into my folder. I did not sign the separation agreement. You need to sign the waiver, Brenda said, pushing a pen toward me. I will take it home to review, I said. You gave me 48 hours in the document itself. Clause 12. I wrote it, remember? Brenda looked at Brad. Brad shrugged. Let him take it. He has no leverage. What is he going to do, sue us for being boring? I stood up, smoothed my jacket, and looked Brad in the eye. Goodbye, Brad. Good luck with the pivot. Yeah, bye, Howard. I walked out. I did not pack a box. I did not say goodbye to the receptionist. I walked straight to the elevator, rode it down to the lobby, and walked out into the Delaware sunshine. My heart was pounding, but not from fear. It was pounding from adrenaline. Because as I clutched that folder to my chest, I knew something they did not. I knew that in 2008, Charles Albright had been drinking heavily when he signed my original employment offer. And because he was paranoid, he had insisted on a very specific clause, a clause that Brad had just triggered. And even worse for them, much worse, was what I had buried in the master licensing agreement itself. The one Brad just said was on autopilot. He had no idea he had just kicked the pilot out of the cockpit. My house in the suburbs is quiet. I like it that way. No kids, no spouse anymore. My partner left 6 years ago, and honestly, I should have sent a thank you note. It is just me and the hum of my kitchen appliances. I kicked off my shoes by the door, but did not change out of my suit. I needed the armor. I poured a glass of white wine and carried it to my dining room table. This was my war room. I placed the papers Brenda had given me on the table. Then I went to the wall safe behind the painting in the hallway. I spun the dial and the heavy steel door swung open. Inside were backup hard drives and a heavy fireproof document box. I brought the box to the table. This was the in case of emergency kit. I opened the box and pulled out the original master license agreement from 2008. The paper was heavy. Here is the thing about contracts that Brad and his MBA buddies do not understand. A contract is a living thing. It evolves. You add amendments, addendums, and schedules. Over 16 years, the streamlined master agreement had grown from a 20-page document to a 400-page behemoth. Every time we entered a new country, we slapped a patch on the code. But the foundation, the original 2008 agreement, was the bedrock. If the bedrock cracks, the skyscraper falls. I opened the file I had saved on the USB drive. I pulled up the 2018 Global Expansion Amendment. This was the document that allowed Streamline to sell its technology to third-party vendors in Asia and Europe. It was the cash cow. It accounted for 70% of the company's current revenue. I compared the digital signature on the 2018 amendment with the signature requirements in the 2008 Master Agreement. And there it was. In 2008, Charles Albright was paranoid about being ousted by a board coup. So I wrote in a clause, Clause 14b, the Sovereignty Clause. It stated that any amendment effectively altering the core intellectual property exclusivity of the company must be countersigned by the founder Charles Albright and the chief licensing architect Howard Miller in wet ink, not digital signatures. Wet ink. It was an old clause we put in to stop hostile takeovers. We joked about it back then. When the 2018 expansion happened, Charles was already sick and checking out. He signed the amendment digitally from a yacht. I signed it digitally from my desk in Wilmington. Everyone was in a hurry. The external lawyers said. Digital was fine and industry standard. I had let it slide. I knew it technically violated Clause 14b, but we were all on the same team. The company was making money and I was getting my bonuses. But the 2008 Master Agreement stated that any amendment violating the signature protocol is void ab initio. That means it is void from the beginning. It does not just stop working today. It means it never legally existed. If the 2018 amendment is void, then Streamline does not have the legal right to license its technology to anyone outside of the United States, which meant every single dollar they had collected from international partners for the last 6 years, hundreds of millions of dollars, was collected illegally. Under federal copyright law, specifically 17 U.S.C. Section 204, any transfer of copyright ownership must be in writing and signed according to the agreed rules. Without valid signatures, they had no authority. It was breach of contract on a planetary scale. I took a sip of wine. Brad did not just fire an employee. He fired the only person whose silence kept a billion-dollar legal error from being exposed. By terminating me without cause, he severed the relationship that kept me from pointing this out. I looked at the termination letter Brad had signed. Role eliminated due to redundancy. You idiot. I started to sort the papers into 3 folders. Folder 1 contained the 2008 Master Agreement with the wet ink clause highlighted, and the 2018 amendment showing only digital signatures. Folder 2 contained a printout of Brad's strategic roadmap where he detailed the new expansion plans that relied entirely on the 2018 amendment being valid. Proof that they were continuing to sell rights they did not have. Folder 3 was the price. I pulled out my original employment contract from 2008. Clause 9, Intellectual Property Retention. In the event of involuntary termination without cause, the employee Howard Miller retains a 1.5% gross royalty interest in all licensing structures he personally authored, retroactive to the date of deployment, vesting immediately upon termination. I had written it back then as a safety net when the startup had no money. 1.5% of nothing was nothing. But 1.5% of Streamline's gross international revenue since 2018 was a massive fortune. The math was simple. They owed me millions in back pay plus the royalty going forward. I sat back. I was not going to sue them yet. That is what a normal person would do. A normal person would call a lawyer and file a complaint. No, I was going to let them build the tower a little higher. I was going to let Brad climb all the way to the top, brag about his victory to the world, and then I was going to pull the pin. I needed them to commit one more act. I needed them to publicly rely on the invalid contract one more time with Brad's signature on the deal. I checked my phone. A notification from LinkedIn showed Brad Albright had posted, "Big things coming next week. Global expansion like you have never seen. Disruption, new era." I smiled. He was doing the work for me. "Proceed, Brad. Disrupt yourself." For 14 days I was a ghost. I did not update my social media, and I did not answer calls from confused former colleagues asking why my email bounced. I woke up at 6 a.m., did some reading, and monitored the wires. I had alerts set up for Streamline, Brad Albright, and Eurotech Solutions. Eurotech was the big fish. They were a German conglomerate looking to license our entire streaming backend for the European market. It was the deal Brad had been chasing to prove to the shareholders that he was a genius. It was a $200 million contract, and it was completely invalid. On a Thursday, the press release dropped. I saw it online. Streamline partners with Eurotech in historic $200 million licensing deal. CEO Brad Albright calls it the dawn of a borderless data future. I pulled up the article. There was a photo of Brad shaking hands with the Eurotech CEO in Berlin. Brad was smiling. He looked like he had conquered the world. The article was full of quotes about synergy and robust legal frameworks. I almost felt bad for the Eurotech lawyers. German lawyers are thorough. They do not like surprises. They assume that when a US company says they own the rights, they actually own them. I zoomed in on the photo. In the background on a screen was a schematic of the data architecture. My architecture, the one governed by the 2008 Master Agreement. I opened my laptop and composed an email. I did not send it to Streamline. I sent it to the General Counsel of Eurotech Solutions, a man named Dieter Neumann. I had met him once at a conference. He was a serious man who wore 3-piece suits and had no interest in small talk. Subject: Inquiry regarding Clause 14b, Streamline Licensing Authority. Dear Mr. Newman, I hope this note finds you well. I am writing to you as the original author of the Streamline Master License Agreement of 2008. I noticed the news about your partnership. As I am no longer with Streamline, I am organizing my personal records. I wanted to bring a small administrative detail to your attention to ensure your compliance team is covered. Could you please verify if the 2018 Global Amendment attached to your license agreement contains the wet ink signatures required under Clause 14B of the founding document? My records indicate that without these specific signatures, the amendment is void ab initio, which would render any sublicensing of the intellectual property to Eurotech unauthorized under U.S. law. I am sure it is just a paperwork oversight on Streamline's end. Given the strict liability laws in the European Union regarding intellectual property, I thought it best to let you know. Best regards, Howard Miller. I hit send. It was a friendly heads up. It framed the massive error as a simple paperwork oversight. I watched the clock. It was 2 p.m. in Delaware, which meant it was 8 p.m. in Germany. Neumann would check his email, read it, and call his team. They would pull the contract, look at Clause 14B, and look at the signatures. Then the panic would begin. I gave it 3 hours. At 5:15 p.m. my phone rang. It was the direct line to the Streamline General Counsel office. I let it go to voicemail. 2 minutes later, it rang again. Brad's cell number. I let it go to voicemail. 5 minutes later, a text from Brad arrived. Howard, pick up the phone. What did you send to Germany? We need to talk now. I took a screenshot of the text and added it to folder 2. Then I replied, I am sorry, who is this? I do not have this number saved. My employment ended 2 weeks ago. The dots appeared instantly. He was typing stop playing games. Newman just put a hold on the wire transfer. He is talking about fraudulent inducement. You need to fix this. Call them back and tell them you were mistaken. I replied slowly, I cannot speak on behalf of the company, Brad. I am not an employee. If you need my professional opinion on the contracts, I am available for consultation. My rate is considerably higher than my salary was. He did not text back. 10 minutes later, an email arrived from the General Counsel, Daniel Vance, subject: Urgent legal consultation and settlement discussion. Dear Howard, we would like to invite you to the office tomorrow morning at 9 a.m. to discuss the recent communications regarding the Eurotech deal. We believe there has been a misunderstanding regarding the validity of the 2018 amendment. We are prepared to discuss a retroactive consulting arrangement to clarify these terms. Please confirm your attendance. Daniel Vance, clarify these terms. That was lawyer speak for, please come save us. I replied with one word, confirmed. I went to my closet and pulled out a vintage Armani suit. It was charcoal gray and sharp. Tomorrow we were going to be intimidating. I slept soundly that night, while my phone buzzed with messages from former colleagues telling me that the executive floor was in complete chaos. I woke up at 6:30 a.m. and put on the Armani suit. I gathered my 3 navy blue folders and placed them in my leather briefcase. I drove to the office. My badge had been deactivated, so I parked in the visitor lot and walked to the lobby. The receptionist, Sarah, looked pale when she saw me. She whispered into the phone and then told me to go straight up to the war room. I took the elevator to the 12th floor. The hallway was empty. They had cleared the area to avoid witnesses. I pushed open the double-glass doors of the boardroom. Brad was pacing, his tie loosened and his jacket off. Daniel Vance, the general counsel, was sitting with his head in his hands, surrounded by stacks of paper. 2 external lawyers were whispering at their laptops. Good morning, gentlemen, I said. Brad turned, his face red. You, he spat. You have some nerve showing up here after trying to sabotage a $200 million deal. I placed my briefcase on the table. I did not sabotage anything. I simply answered a question from a colleague. This is a technicality, Brad yelled. We can just sign it now. Backdate it. No, you cannot, I said. Charles Albright is dead. He cannot sign it, and I am no longer an employee. So I cannot sign it either. The external lawyer, Julian Thorne, spoke up. Mr. Miller, we are prepared to offer you a consulting agreement to rectify the signature issue. We can offer you a standard rate if I held up my hand. Stop. I placed my hand on folder 1. This is not a consulting gig. This is a hostage negotiation, and I am the one holding the gun. The room went silent. I pushed folder 1 toward Daniel Vance. Read page 42, clause 14B, I said. Daniel Vance adjusted his glasses. He read the clause and looked at Brad. He is right, Brad. Howard is right. Without the wet ink signatures, the 2018 amendment is void ab initio. It means the amendment never legally existed, I said. You have been selling rights you do not own for 6 years. We will fight it in court, Julian Thorne threatened. In 3 years? I asked. After your partners freeze all payments? Streamline will be insolvent in 6 months without international revenue. Brad sank into his chair. What do you want? I slid folder 2 across the table. This documents every violation since 2018, totaling $840 million in unauthorized revenue. If I send this to the SEC, it is securities fraud. You reported illegal revenue to shareholders, Brad. That is jail time. Brad looked at Julian Thorne, who sighed and nodded. If he goes to the SEC, the investigation alone destroys the company. I opened folder 3. This is the bill, I said. Under Clause 9 of my 2008 contract, since I was terminated without cause, I am owed a retroactive 1.5% gross royalty on all international licensing revenue. Daniel Vance did the math and gasped. That is $12.6 million immediately, plus future royalties. This is extortion, Brad whispered. No, it is a contract your father signed, I said. And you triggered it when you terminated me to save a few bucks. Julian Thorne looked at Brad. The termination letter says redundancy. We cannot change it now. He has you cold. I do not have $12.6 million in liquid cash, Brad said. Then sell the yacht, I replied. Brad looked at Daniel Vance, who nodded. Pay him. It is the only way to save the Eurotech deal. We can structure it to include a waiver where Howard validates the signatures. I want a consulting fee of another $2 million for signing the validation, I added. Call it an apology tax. Brad stormed out to call the CFO. Over the next hour, we drafted the settlement. Julian Thorne tried to include a global non-compete. Delete it, I said. I am not signing a non-compete. If I want to work for Eurotech next week, I will. Thorne deleted it. I also demanded a mutual non-disparagement clause and a formal written apology from Brad, signed in wet ink. Acknowledging his error, Brad returned, defeated. You get your money, he muttered. Just sign the validation. Confirmation number first, I said. We waited in silence. 10 minutes later, my phone buzzed. A deposit of $14. $6 million had cleared. I picked up my pen, signed the validation, and signed the settlement. Pleasure doing business with you, Brad, I said, closing my briefcase. I walked out of the boardroom. I took the elevator to the lobby, past Sarah, and walked out into the sunshine. I drove to the Rusty Nut, the dive bar where Charles Albright used to take us. I ordered a cold drink and looked at my phone. I had deleted all my work apps. I felt lighter. I thought about Brad. He would survive, but he would never sleep soundly again. Every time he signed a contract, he would wonder if there was another trapdoor. And the best part was, there was. In 6 months, an automated script I wrote years ago would purge the redundant database logs, erasing years of historical archive unless overridden. I could have told him, but some things you do just for the chaos. I finished my drink, left a $100 bill on the counter, and walked out. I had a yoga class to attend, and after that, the Amalfi Coast was waiting.